If you're looking for a Euro where you're going to be building huts, you're going to be building ziggurats, you're going to be paying tribute to other civilizations, all while preparing for floods that are going to come through and wipe out more than just some of that, but also some of the progress that you're making, then Assyria might be the game. Now, Assyria is a game you've probably heard of before. This is the second edition of Assyria. This was originally designed by Emmanuel Ornella.
Ornella, yeah.
But now it's at Garphill Games, along with designers Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald, to bring sort of what's being called by the original designer the definitive version of the game.
Yeah, he said this is not a reprint of that old game Assyria. They said kind of think of this as Assyria 2, because what they did two things with this version of the game. For one, they kind of modernized it. And this is straight from the designer himself. He said, while this game was maybe at the height of complexity 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2009,
yeah,
I think, when it first came out.
Things have changed, gamers have changed. So they're bringing it more in line with what you might expect from modern games, including obviously a modern look, but also to bring it more in line with what you'd expect from Garphill games. Like this is part of their Ancient Anthologies series, which has games like Hadrian's Wall in it, games that are kind of based on historical
ancient civilizations,
cultures,
if you will.
And this is one of them.
And I also would say this is right within a lot of the weights that you would expect from Garphill. Now, Garphill has various weights. I would call this pretty medium, maybe medium plus, but it is definitely heavier than the original game.
Yeah, so let's talk about the game. We're going to talk about what it's doing as well. So this is Assyria, and you'll see on the board here, this is the area of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is the area of the world where the Assyrian Empire, which for its time was the largest empire in the world, this is where it got its start. We're actually kind of pre-Assyria. We are the different tribes that eventually would reunite to make the Assyrian Empire. And we are kind of trying to eke out a living here within the Tigris and Euphrates. And it's never been more clear to me the disparate change of things inside and outside of the valley. Because you've got this dry, dead land on either side, which is kind of where you start. But your goal is to kind of work your way into the middle, into this lush green land, which is where you want to live. Also, it's where you're going to get the most points.
It is where you're going to get the most points. You're going to be placing huts out here in a pretty unique way, similar to the original game, but slightly enhanced, and then ultimately also trying to build ziggurats out here. The more ziggurats you get out there, the more points you might get. But all of those are combined with a few different tracks, like any Euro is going to have, that are sort of interdependent on one another.
Yeah, and these are kind of spread out across the board, and they're going to reward you for doing specific things in the game, and they're going to kind of tie into some of the actions you're taking. But as David alluded to at the beginning of this video, over the course of the game, these rivers are going to flood. They're going to knock out your progress on both of these tracks. So the game is kind of divided into, you might call it two eras. That's marked up here by the green and these kind of reddish-brown tokens. You're going to play 3 rounds, and then there's going to be a flood, 3 more rounds, and then there's a flood, and then that's it. You go to in-game scoring. So you got to be aware that as you kind of build out and you can build on these rivers, you're going to lose everything on those rivers.
Yeah.
Which is what it sucked back then.
Yeah, you're going to lose everything on the rivers during those floods. And the other thing about this upper right-hand corner, not only does it sort of outline the flow of the overall game, but then down here, it outlines the flow step by step of each round that you're going to play in the game.
Yeah, and there's a variety of steps that you're going to go through, and they can kind of be summed up through a few key ideas that we're going to explain, because every phase is going to kind of have the same set of things you do. You're going to be drafting. You're going to draft, kind of bid for turn order and for the cards that you're going to get at the start of the game. Then you're going to kind of expand out from your starting ziggurats. Then you're going to take actions, and then you're going to clean up. And that's really all you're doing going across this. But each one of those steps has a lot of complexity, and it's going to require you to really think, because this game has one aspect that I think are classic to Euros, and that's the idea of feeding your people. And that is amped up to a huge level in this game.
Yeah, I will say, it is amped up. It's significant, and you're going to face it a lot in this game. However, you're going to face it pretty clearly as you're playing. Yeah. This isn't going to be one of those things where you're doing a lot of things, and then you kind of forget that you have to feed. As you're doing the things, it's kind of staring you right in the face what cards you have, where you're placing your huts, and whether or not you're going to be able to support all of those huts through the cards and the resources or the food cards that you've collected. Now, I'll say right off the bat, you will lose huts in this game. This is not a game where you're like, oh, I've figured it out and I've never lost a hut. It's not going to be that sort of game. There's going to be times where you're going to be placing more huts than you even want to, because depending on these tokens that get flipped, you're going to get huts that you have to place. You're going to have excess huts in this game, which weren't necessarily the case in the original. You can actually collect huts so that you could have maybe a bigger turn next turn by using some of those excess huts. But it's a delicate balance between how many of those huts you want to use in one turn, because you have to support them all unless you want or you're planning on losing some.
Yeah, that expansion is a huge part of the game. You're using these huts to score points. You're using these huts to generate camels, which are kind of an action currency. And you're ultimately using these huts to build ziggurats. But at the start of every round, we're going to flip over this first token. I flipped over the first one that says 4. You're going to take 4 huts, put them into your supply, and you have to put those out onto the board. It doesn't matter if you're like, how do I feed them? You're expending out for 4. That's like where these come into play, because sometimes it might say you only put out 3 and you're like, but I can actually feed 4. Let me put out my extra one. But you have to put out at least 4 and you have to feed them. Each hex is going to require a very specific type of food that you're going to find on these food cards. So that is why they call this like a bidding game. There is a whole element of bidding for these food cards that can get pretty cutthroat, because you know what you need. You also know what your opponents need. You got to weigh those together.
Yeah, and after you collect those huts, that's the next thing you're going to do, is bid for these cards. The bidding is unique. In the original game, you simply drafted. If you were first to go, you could say, I'm going to take this row. That's it. No one else is taking it. In this game, you're actually going to place a marker next to the row that you want, and you can place it in any one of these 3 spots. You could place it here for no bid. You could spend 1 or up to 3. If you spend 3, it's effectively guaranteeing that you're going to get those cards. However, if you spend anything less, someone else on their turn can come in and bid a little higher than you, or a lot higher than you, and then you're going to have to move to another space. It's a unique bidding mechanic that I've seen in a couple of other games, but it kind of keeps that bidding going alive until everyone's sort of settled on one row of cards.
Yeah, and if you can get one of these rows of cards without paying any victory points at all, that's great. But these cards are arranged so that the top cards are not as good as the bottom cards, and you can see that they start including more and more resources. However, there's a very interesting aspect of this game where more resources on a card isn't necessarily best. You could come to this row here and you're getting 6 grapes. Yeah. That's great. That's a lot of grapes.
I mean, in a way, it's great.
But you're not going to have 6 huts on grapes to use all those grapes. You're going to need a little bit of other stuff. You're going to need some salt, some meat, some fish. So you really want to have kind of an arrangement here. Getting stuck with this spot might actually hurt you. And then additionally, turn order is going to go from the top to the bottom of this track as well. So if you're okay with like having the weaker cards, you're going to go first. But there's one other thing that's brand new for this game that you have to weigh as well, and that's these favor cards on this rightmost area. When you draft a row, you're going to take all of it, including that favor card, which you can think of kind of like an action card that can be played later to give you some kind of an effect. So that's, I think, a little bit more of that modernization coming into the game a little bit.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea of how that works in the game, if I were to have drafted this row of cards, and I'll lay them out here so you can see, I'd have this favor to use, but these are the cards I'd be able to use as I'm placing my huts or when it comes time to feed them. So if I had 4 huts, and I also had this, by the way, at the beginning of the game to give me 2 grapes. So I have all 3 of these cards to place 4, maybe 5 huts if I wanted to go ahead and place my extra hut. But if I wanted to place, I have to build for my ziggurat. So there's a grape. There's another grape up here. I can't get there quite yet. So I'm going to spend this fish to go here. I'll spend one of these as a wild to do this meat. And then I can spend this other one for the grape. Now, I could go ahead and spend this 5th one. I don't think I will. So I could have effectively done it with these 2 cards, saving this card for the future.
Yeah, because there's no change. If you only use one of the resources on a card that provides 2, the card's gone.
Yeah, that is rough. Like Ryan was saying, you could take one of those 3 grape cards, and if you only spend 2 of the grapes when placing huts, you're not getting that last grape back.
Yeah, now putting these huts out is a big part of the game, but they also introduced 2 new types of tokens or pieces that you can put out on the board. One is called ships, and one is called farmers. And these are going to change up the game a little bit, potentially for everybody. First of all, farmers are going to come out and cover these different resource icons on the board. This isn't saying that the farmers are paying those for you, but what they are saying is that they're turning these into wilds. So in that aspect, if you had taken 6 grapes and you say, I'm not on 6 grapes, you can try to collect farmers, put farmers out, and then use that grape card to feed them no matter what they are. And then ships come out and are usable. They're almost like shipping routes. They cross the river. Players can use those. So purple could have used this ship if it was placed here to expand out past, and it just kind of lets you get a little further. If there's a chain of ships that go all the way down the river, you can use that entire chain to move somewhere. You can even place your huts on the water itself. But again, keeping in mind that all of these ships and any huts that are there that were used to cross are all going to be destroyed come that first flood phase.
Yeah, so you're basically building some things up over those 3 rounds and doing as much as you can with them. But like Ryan said, that's all going to get washed away. Not everything on the board, but everything on those rivers.
Yeah, and this is a significant part of the game. Like this whole beginning part here takes up a lot of different spaces on this board because placing them, then you have to feed them. If you can't feed them, then they die. If you do feed them, then they're going to score you points and offer you some other opportunities. So you've got to think about a lot of things when you're placing these. For one, your huts have to be fed like we talked about. For 2, your huts can be used to build wells, which are going to score you some additional things over the course of the game. And lastly, your huts are going to become the start of new ziggurats later. So you need to think about all of these things as you're placing these huts. And if you can't feed them, you got to remember that some are going to die, and then your plans might be foiled. And building those the wells with the huts is kind of a big thing you're trying to do.
Yeah, you can actually get pretty strategic with this too. If you're laying your huts down and you know one's going to die, you could place one here, for instance, if I didn't have this grape, and then maybe get to this, knowing that I did have a meat. I know this one's going to die, but it still allowed me to build this one out here, which could be used to build a ziggurat later, extending basically the places on the board from which I can build.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategy in where you're placing. There's going to be a lot of blocking, especially if you see somebody that's about to go somewhere where it's a really good spot for ziggurat. You could place a hut there before they do. And then again, I mentioned this twice, building these wells. You can build wells on any one of these little circles, provided that you have surrounded it completely with your own huts. So if somebody's in the process of doing that, it's very easy to maybe come and block them so they can't do it. If you manage to build these huts, or manage to get the huts in a circle and build the well in the middle, it's going to get you 2 things. For one, it's going to get you some extra camels that turn, which I already mentioned are the action points you're going to spend in a second. But also, wells are going to score points during every flood. You're going to score those wells, and you're going to score your ziggurats based on how high you get on this offering track, which we'll talk about. But again, you're kind of setting the stage for the actions you're going to take are all being set by this, because the remaining huts that you have out are going to score you some points, and they're also going to score you some camels. You're going to get points, less points for the desert, more points for the valley, and you're going to gain camels for being on the water and also for being on each of these rivers. So you could be in a situation where I have a lot of huts on the river, and then I'm also on this one river. I don't know, is this Tigris and Euphrates? It's one or the other, you know.
Yes.
They're the 2 rivers. So in this instance, I'd get 2, 4, 6, 7 camels, and that's kind of all printed on your player board to make it really easy. These camels are the action points that you're going to get to spend in the next phase of the game, which is the action phase. And that layers directly on top of the expansion phase where you just expanded out.
Yeah, the expansion phase looks like a lot when you look in the upper right-hand corner, but it actually goes pretty quickly. It's the action phase where you're going to be spending your camels, which is where you're going to spend most of your time playing this game. In this phase, each player in turn order is going to spend camels to take one of, 11 different actions. Now, this is not a how to play. We're not going to go through every one of those 11 actions, but it allows you to do on your turn, spend some of those camels, taking it down on your camel track to do a thing. A lot of these, there's a lot of things to do here. It's going to allow you to interact and pay tribute to some of these civilizations. Allows you to build ziggurats. All of these things, too, kind of are interconnected because as you build ziggurats, it's going to unlock discounts for building maybe the next piece of a ziggurat or other things in the game.
Yeah, you'll notice if you look at the player board right now, you'll see that these are kind of arranged in a grid. Every piece of a ziggurat that you build, and you have to build like the base, then you can kind of build the next level and then the next level. Each of the rows that you build are going to make subsequent pieces cheaper. So building more bases means building more bases is cheaper. Building the second level means they're cheaper to build the second level. The third level, however, does not make it cheaper. It just gives you some kind of bonus. And the goal really is to build a ziggurat as tall as you can and then visit one of these civilizations to kind of put a little roof on top. If you can do that, that's a completed ziggurat. That's great.
Yes.
However, these civilizations are going to be changing throughout the game. These are going to be kind of ebbing and flowing as civilizations rise and fall. So the bonuses that you're getting for placing these are going to change. And so it's going to be a matter of timing as far as who actually gains access to those roofs. So that's a lot of the actions that you're doing are just involving building, or these 4 sets of actions down here, which are still tied into that grid, but going up and down. You'll notice each one of these kind of gives you some kind of transaction. At the start of the game, you can do this, move up this offering track 1 for 1, 1 camel for 1 space. But if you get all the way to the top, you can do 3 for 3. These actions are not printed on the player board because you actually flip them over and only get to do them 1 time. So all 4 of these are one-time use, but they're good. They're going to get you the ships and the farmers, and they're going to get you cards and gold. The rest of the actions you can do as many times as you want.
And those are per round.
Per round, that's right,
Those will refresh. The nice thing about the iconography is whenever you're looking for an action to do, you just look for these little greenish banners. Like we said, there's a lot on your player board, but you're going to see some of these on the top of the civilization. When you interact with the civilization, you're going to spend some degree of camels to interact with them and pay tribute. All of these are going to be spending gold or maybe ships to pay tribute to that civilization and go up on the influence track here.
Yeah, and this influence track and this offering track, you're going to want to go up them. This track on the right side is going to give you points. It's going to make your wells and your ziggurats worth more points, and it's going to give you the option to unlock more of these roofs to place over here for some benefits. This track over here is going to give you food, but also getting higher on these tracks is going to matter during the scoring phase. Because we talked about the flood, so we'll just skip ahead to that because you're going to take your actions, you're going to go until everyone passes, you're going to do that whole expansion again, you're going to do all of this. You're going to do it 3 times before the flood. The flood is where the bad things happen. That's where everything just gets washed away completely that was on the river. And then from what's left, that's where you're going to look at scoring these 2 things. You're going to score, like I said, the wells, you're going to score your ziggurats, and you're going to go score points for getting high up on that track. Whoever's the highest, you're actually going to look at all of these points up here, add them all together, and get all those points.
Yeah.
Which can be significant.
Now, second most is going to get
the
the 2
less,
lower ones, and then third place is going to get the lowest.
and nothing for 4th place. Sorry. So scoring those tracks can be significant, but then you're going to reset them. So when we were talking earlier about how you're going to lose a lot of your progress, we weren't joking. Like, you're going to lose anything you build on the river. And hopefully by this point, you've at least got some huts or maybe a ziggurat inside the middle to allow you to expand out from there. Otherwise, you're just expanding from whatever survived the flooding.
Yeah, the progress you make on the board, while it's going to get disrupted throughout the game, it's going to let you expand, so you're not just going to have one pocket of things. You might successfully get that other ziggurat and have a few different pockets. That's the idea of how you want to strategically use your huts. You're not just simply building huts around a ziggurat, letting them go away, and doing that again. You want to try to spread out around the board as much as possible, which brings in a fair amount of interaction in this game because there is a fair amount of blocking that will be going on.
For sure.
Certainly at a certain point.
For sure. And again, there's no like direct PvP conflict with the other civilizations, but you will be blocking each other. You will be vying for these different spots on that tribute track. You will be racing up these different tracks. Obviously, the bidding is going to add a ton of player interaction here. So all of that's going on all the while you're doing this stuff. Like I said, 6 times in the game. 6 times in the game, you have to feed all of your huts. Plus a 7th time. At the end of the game, you're going to score for any huts that have actually survived this entire game. That means at the very, very end of the game, there's one more feeding phase without income.
Yeah, you're not taking new cards.
So
like I said earlier, when I used my cards but had some left over, you're going to want to do that throughout the game strategically so you're set up to at least save as many of your huts as possible at this point.
This is a game of pushing back the attrition because, the food is tight in this game. I mean, everything you're kind of doing is to try to maintain your civilization and not lose everything. So a lot of different actions you can take, a lot of different tracks to go up. There's cards, there's bidding. So if you couldn't tell, if you have played the old one, we didn't really break down all the changes, but you can see there is a lot more. And I've used the word modernization because they use the word modernization. I'd say that's fair.
Yeah, I would say so too. Assyria was probably a classic ahead of its time when it was originally released. It probably didn't get the attention that it deserves, so hopefully this Garphill edition, along with the original designer, is going to bring it to a lot of new people. This is definitely feels like it fits right within their line, and also just fits within sort of Garphill's line of games in
Oh,
general.
this definitely fits with all their like Ancient Anthology. Like it fits right in with those history games.
Yeah, for sure. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.